that the friends made when they were returning without Nolan. They say he wanted to stay and be with a friend girl he just met. She, Katie, says no, he left with his friends. I got a problem right there. That's a conflict in the testimony. But when you listen to the call the other friends made, they called Seatow, S-E-A-T-O-W, and said, we're sinking. In this newly released sound, you can make out somebody saying, wake the F up. What does that mean? I'm not resting till I find out if that's real. Has it been doctored? And if it is real, who are they talking to?
Stories with Nancy Grace. You know, Nancy, Attorney Ben Crump there has a point. You mean no one saw anything? Where do you see this investigation, where things stand?
I've got a lot of problems with the investigation so far, but remember, we are seeing through a mirror darkly. We don't know all the evidence. There's been one state's autopsy, and that has not been released. The family sent the body of Nolan Wells for a second independent autopsy, and that autopsy says undetermined. This is what I do know, Griff. I know on the back of his head, the occipital bone back here, there is deep red subcutaneous tissue. It's not anywhere else. It is not pooling of the blood once he's died. The blood pools at the lowest point. It's not that, because it's only there. I'm curious, does that suggest a blow to the head? There are many accidental possibilities. When you look at the video out there are tons of boats. They're close together. Did he drink and drown in between one of those boats and nobody noticed? I don't know that. However, that deep reddening on the occipital bone is very disturbing to me. Also, you think, oh, he drowned, but we don't have the lungs. When the second autopsy got the body, the lungs and the throat were missing. Now, I understand, Griff, why they took the lungs to determine if he had drowned. But why was the neck missing? What about the interior of the throat sparked the initial medical examiner's concern? Was there some bruising on the neck? I don't know. So right now, it could go in so many different directions.
So many questions that you raise, Nancy, and as someone who's investigated these things, you know which questions to ask. I want to take you back, though, because that marking on the back of his head is not insignificant, as you rightfully point out, because also the size of it, right? It's like a 12 by 8. I mean, it's not a small clue in this. Expand on that a bit, if you will. Right there is showing exactly where the reddened tissue is, and is subcutaneous under the skin. Now, as we all know, in an autopsy, the skin is pulled away from the body to look at the tissue underneath the skin. That's where the second medical examiner, doctor, found it. Many people are arguing it was a blow to the back of the head. Many people argue he fell, hit his head on the boat, and went over. Well, if that happened, didn't anybody see him? So it's going to boil down to witness testimony and what that neck truly reveals. Again, why did the first medical examiner keep that part of the body? It was not sent to the second autopsy. That raises my antenna. There's a lot of hate going on around this case. It's very hard to understand. Again, it could be accidental. It may not be. And we can't stop the investigation until we know. This young man was 18. You know how old my twins are? 18. And I would be lying on the front of the courthouse steps screaming for an answer till I got one.
What does it look like when a group of people leave an island without one of their own, and nobody calls it an emergency? What does it mean when a distress call gets canceled within 10 minutes by someone who wasn't even on the water? What happens to the truth when a young man's phone comes back from a holiday weekend, completely wiped of any evidence that the day ever happened? And why did it take 2 full days to find a body on the same island where dozens of people had been celebrating just hours before? These are not abstract questions. They are the documented, time-stamped, officially recorded sequence of events surrounding the death of 18-year-old Nolan Wells in the waters off Horn Island, Mississippi, on July 4, 2026. Law enforcement reached a conclusion quickly. The family rejected it immediately. A grand jury is now waiting on a sealed autopsy that the public has never seen. Every answer that exists in this case is buried inside documents, recordings, and the silence of people who were there and haven't told the full story. I have spent time in every layer of the available public record on this case, and what I'm about to lay out for you is a documented breakdown that goes further than anything you've seen covered elsewhere. Stay with me from the beginning. If you're watching File Unsolved for the first time, this is exactly what this channel does. We go into the details that matter, we stay grounded in verified evidence, and we don't leave until every documented thread has been examined. Hit the like button right now if you think cases like this deserve serious, sustained attention, and subscribe to File Unsolved so you're here for every update as this investigation develops. Horn Island sits approximately 12 miles off the Mississippi coastline, a barrier island within the Gulf Islands National Seashore managed by the National Park Service. It has no permanent residents, no services, no emergency infrastructure. On major holidays, it draws significant numbers of boaters from the surrounding coastal communities, who anchor offshore, wade ashore, and spend their hours there beyond the reach of any immediate oversight. July 4th, 2026, brought one of those crowds. Multiple groups departed from the Ocean Springs area that morning in separate vessels, heading for the island across the water. It was not a single organized party. It was a loose collection of people from the same community, moving toward the same destination with their own groups and their own boats. Nolan Wells was on one of those boats. GPS tracking data released by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources recorded that vessel leaving a private dock at 9:56 in the morning and arriving at the western tip of Horn Island at 11:14. Those timestamps come directly from state records and are not disputed by any party to this case. On board with Nolan were 4 other individuals. Bart Edmston Jr. was 21 years old, the only legal adult in the group, and under Mississippi law, the person who bore responsibility for the vessel and everyone on it. He had been an accomplished kicker and punter at Ocean Springs High School and held a signed commitment to the University of Southern Mississippi football program at the time of the trip. Also present were Javon Williams and Traces Tin Shepard, both from the Ocean Springs area. A woman identified in early reporting as Laney was initially listed as part of the group. When investigators reached her, she stated she was not on Horn Island that day and was instead at a separate location with a different group of people entirely. No official statement has confirmed or contradicted that account. The group spent several hours on the island. Witnesses who were subsequently interviewed by search teams described Nolan as having consumed a significant amount of alcohol during that time. The precise quantity and its physiological effect on him are questions that a complete toxicology panel is built to answer, and those results remain sealed as part of the official investigation. What is confirmed, attributed directly to the Jackson County Sheriff's Department, is that Nolan Wells was last seen alive at approximately 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He was wearing blue swim trunks and sunglasses. That physical description is what law enforcement released publicly when they later appealed for witnesses to come forward, and it represents the final verified, documented image of him before the account of that day begins to break apart. A video that surfaced in the days following his disappearance became immediately contested. Attorney Ben Crump, retained by the Wells-Wansley family, told reporters that the footage captured Nolan's voice and that he could be heard demanding his phone back from someone. Crump described him as saying words to the effect of, "Give me my phone, what are you doing?" and presented this as evidence of a confrontation. Traces Tin Shepard gave a direct counter-account to Rolling Stone. He said the voice in the video was his own, coming from a separate argument that had no connection to Nolan, and that while Nolan was in the water nearby, he was not visible in the frame and was not the person speaking. Javon Williams told TMZ separately that he also did not believe the voice belonged to Nolan. Crump later acknowledged publicly that his team should have taken further steps to verify the account before presenting it to the press. The dispute has not been settled by any official finding, and what that video actually captures remains formally unresolved. By mid-afternoon, the group was preparing to leave. Warren Hudson, who identified himself publicly as Nolan's closest friend and who spoke to media extensively following the disappearance, stated that the group had been calling out to Nolan and urging him to get on the boat before they departed. He characterized Nolan's decision to remain as a personal choice. At 4:31 in the afternoon, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources GPS system recorded the boat leaving Horn Island. Footage of the vessel at that moment of departure was reviewed by investigative reporter Alexis Tereshchuk, who confirmed the video was shot at the island during the actual departure and not on open water afterward. 7 people were visible on board. Nolan Wells was not among them. That count of 7 matches precisely what the caller would later tell the United States Coast Guard dispatcher when asked how many people the boat was carrying. Approximately 30 minutes before the GPS captured the boat leaving, while the vessel was still at Horn Island, a call was placed to Sea Tow, a private marine assistance company that functions as a water-based towing service. The dispatcher who took the call was named Vicky. The caller identified himself as Bart. He told her they were at the western tip of Horn Island, that the bilge pump had failed, and that the boat was taking on water and going down. He requested a tow back to Ocean Springs Harbor or Fort Bayou launch, and stated they held a Sea Tow membership. The nature of the call was a declared emergency. When Vicky asked how high the water had risen inside the vessel, the caller said ankles. His responses throughout the call were fragmented and at times difficult to follow. At moments where direct answers were called for, the replies were disjointed. At one specific point in the recording, there is silence where a clear response should have been present. A separate call to the United States Coast Guard was recorded and subsequently obtained by NBC News. In that exchange, the dispatcher asked whether everyone on board was in good health. The caller said yes, everybody is all right. The dispatcher then asked whether all persons were accounted for. The caller said yes. That exchange occurred around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. 31 minutes later, the GPS shows the boat leaving Horn Island with 7 people. Nolan Wells was not one of them. Either the group being accounted for in that Coast Guard call did not include Nolan, or the information provided to the dispatcher was not accurate. Both possibilities exist in the documented record. Neither has been officially resolved. After Vicky logged the Sea Tow distress report, the company contacted a local boat captain nearby and asked him to respond. That captain called back within minutes and told the dispatcher he had spoken with a man named Jerry Adkerson, identified as the grandfather of the boat's operator. Adkerson told the captain the situation had been handled and emergency assistance was no longer needed. The call was canceled. The entire sequence from the initial distress call to the cancellation took approximately 10 minutes. Adkerson was not on the boat. He was not at the island. He was on land. By the accounts given in subsequent interviews, the people on the boat were not aware the cancellation had occurred, or that Adkerson had been the one to make that call. Dave Mack, contributing analysis to the Nancy Grace broadcast, framed the problem directly. Someone on the water had declared an active emergency on a vessel taking on water in 31 feet of open gulf, and within 10 minutes, a man calling from land with no first-hand knowledge of the current situation on that boat stood down the response. Jerry Adkerson later cooperated with investigators, allowing his own boat to be searched and his GPS records to be reviewed. The boat's documented movement after departing Horn Island added further questions to the timeline. It did not travel directly home. After being towed approximately 3 miles, the tow was released and the boat continued under its own power. At 5:44 in the afternoon, GPS data shows it arriving at a private dock on El Camino Railroad in Gulf Hills, Mississippi, a residential neighborhood above Ocean Springs. Investigators and researchers tracking the case noted that location as potentially significant because Nolan's phone was later recovered from a house in that same general area on the night he went missing. The boat did not stay at that dock. It traveled to Fort Bayou at 5:52, returned to the original dock at 6:06, made a second trip to Fort Bayou, and was eventually brought to a boat launch, loaded onto a trailer, and removed by vehicle. The vessel arrived at the El Camino dock at 5:44 and was not pulled from the water for more than an hour and 13 minutes, despite the operator having declared a sinking emergency only hours earlier. The standard response when a vessel has taken on water is immediate removal from the water. The documented pattern of additional trips and extended time in the water does not align with that response. Inside the Sea Tow audio, Beneath the primary exchange between the caller and Vicky, there were sounds that drew intense scrutiny once the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources made the recording public. Nancy Grace played the audio on her broadcast and stated she could identify specific phrases in the background, including what sounded like a voice telling someone to wake up, the phrase, "Oh my God," and someone saying, "Don't die." She stated directly that if those words were real and verifiable, they would change the direction of the investigation. Digital audio expert Todd Shipley appeared on the broadcast and explained that forensic audio analysis involves isolating separate audio streams, adjusting gain levels to surface quieter sounds, filtering ambient noise, and separating background activity from the foreground conversation. Shipley then made an observation that complicated every claim about the background content. He said the publicly released version of the recording did not appear to be complete. For a call of that nature, he said, there should be more recorded content than what had been made available. Without the full, unedited original audio, he stated a defensible forensic analysis could not be conducted. A social media analyst identified as Anelka published a breakdown claiming that before Vicky answers the call, a female voice asks, "Is he dead?" followed by someone saying Nolan's name, and then the phrase, "Oh my God." A separate online commentator identified as Secret Service stated he also believed significant background activity was present and that the caller sounded impaired. Digital forensics expert Robert Freed, interviewed independently by News Nation, reviewed the enhanced versions being circulated online and said he could not corroborate those interpretations. He could not confirm the "is he dead" claim or the other phrases being identified. As of the writing of this script, the background voice claims are unverified, have not been confirmed by any official forensic body, have not been ruled out, and the complete unedited recording has not been released for published official analysis. At 11:07 in the evening, Christine Wells Wansley received a call from one of Nolan's friends, telling her he had not returned. She contacted her friend Tashima, whose sons had been part of the group that day. Christine checked Nolan's location through Life 360, while Tashima's sons checked his Snapchat location simultaneously. The two applications showed his device in different places. Both locations were on land. Neither matched where Nolan was supposed to be. That gap between two separate location services was the first concrete documented indication that something beyond a simple delay had occurred. When Tashima went to the house where the device appeared to be located, the phone was not handed over immediately. Christine and Tashima had to press before it was returned. Warren Hudson addressed this directly in a multi-part interview on the Officer Tatum program, stating the phone had been taken off the boat by a group member and left in a truck belonging to someone named Wyatt, that no one had the passcode, that no one had accessed its contents, and that it was returned as soon as the family came for it. His account was consistent across every interview he gave. The experience Christine and Tashima described of actually retrieving the phone reflected a different version of how cooperative that process was. When Christine examined the phone, both of Nolan's Snapchat accounts were empty. She told Good Morning America this was not a matter of content expiring. Snapchat retains photos and videos for up to 24 hours. That window had not closed. There was simply nothing stored on either account. No photographs from the boat, no videos from the island, no documentation of a holiday that every person who knew Nolan said he would have captured. He had a known habit of recording social moments. The explanation offered from the group's side was that reception was unavailable near Horn Island. Alexis Tereshchuk documented on the Nancy Grace broadcast how that explanation evolved over time, first becoming a claim that no one had brought phones because of the way-to-shore process, then shifting to a saltwater exposure argument. Each version was overtaken by evidence. Videos showed group members with phones on the island, and the sea tow call itself demonstrated that a clear voice call could be placed from those exact coordinates without interruption. The same signal that carried a distress call to a dispatcher was strong enough to support any social media platform. Digital forensic analyst Heather Barnhart explained on the same broadcast that a proper forensic extraction captures soft deletes, hard deletes, and timestamps on every action taken on the device, showing precisely when any content was removed and in what order. That log is recoverable through professional tools, regardless of subsequent attempts to clear the phone. Attorney Gary Bufkin filed subpoenas on behalf of Nolan's estate against Snapchat, WhatsApp, TikTok, Meta Platforms, Life360, and additional services, seeking account records, login histories, IP addresses, and all communications connected to Nolan's accounts. A joint forensic inspection of the phone was agreed to by both the family's legal team and the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office. Those results have not been released. On the morning of July 6, 2026, at 8:40 a.m., a United States Park Ranger found a body in the water near the northwestern tip of Horn Island. Nolan Wells had been found 44 hours after he was last seen alive on that same island. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind confirmed the identification through dental records and reported no immediately visible signs of physical injury on the body. That initial observation supported the framing that local law enforcement had already begun moving toward. Sheriff John Ledbetter had publicly stated that investigators understood Nolan to have voluntarily stayed on the island when his group left. The accidental drowning conclusion was where the official account was heading. The family did not accept it. The official autopsy was conducted by the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office on July 7th. Those findings remain sealed and are designated for presentation to a grand jury. Christine and Elmore arranged for an independent autopsy, transporting Nolan's body to Washington, D.C., where forensic pathologist Dr. Roger Mitchell conducted his own examination. Ben Crump announced the results on July 22nd at the NOC National Convention in Chicago, placing the case explicitly within a national civil rights framework. Dr. Mitchell's preliminary report concluded that the cause and manner of death were undetermined, pending further investigation, and stated that foul play could not be ruled out. He also found no lacerations, fractures, or deep tissue injuries, consistent with the coroner's initial observations. The independent examination acknowledged its own limitations, having been conducted after the original autopsy and with state toxicology still pending. Nolan Wells was the only black person in the group on that boat. Everyone else was white. That is a confirmed, documented detail. In Mississippi, with its extensively recorded history of racial inequity in the justice system, that fact shaped how this case was received nationally from the moment it became public. Ben Crump's entry into the case communicated without ambiguity that the family was not navigating the legal system quietly. He had previously represented the families of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor. Attorney Liza Park joined the legal team alongside Crump, and attorney Eric Hers was retained to lead the independent investigation on the family's side. Tyler Perry covered the expenses for Nolan's funeral, held on July 21st at Centerpoint Church in Ocean Springs. The FBI formally opened an investigation into threats made against witnesses and officials connected to the case. Mississippi Attorney General Lynn Fitch issued a public warning that threatening or intimidating investigators, prosecutors, or witnesses could result in criminal charges. An ABC News obtained document from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources confirmed that witnesses on Horn Island provided descriptions of Nolan to search teams after the main group's boat had already left. People on that island after 4:31 in the afternoon had seen him, had observed his condition, and had communicated those observations to searchers. None of those witnesses have given a complete public account of what they saw during that window. Alexis Tereshchuk identified the question that sits beneath every unresolved thread in this investigation. Who was with Nolan Wells on Horn Island after 4:31 p.m.? The GPS confirms his group was gone. But the island was not empty. Someone was there. Someone saw what happened in those final hours before he entered the water. That account does not yet exist in any public record. No charges have been filed in connection with the death of Nolan Wells as of the time this script was written. The grand jury process has been confirmed by District Attorney Angel Myers-Myrick, but has not been given a timeline. The sealed state autopsy and its accompanying toxicology represent the most consequential forensic documents in this entire case, and they have not been seen by the public. The subpoenas are active. The phone forensics are pending. The witnesses who were on that island after 4:31 have not spoken fully. Everything that matters most in this investigation is still waiting to be resolved. The night before July 4th, Nolan made his mother dinner. He cooked salmon, hugged her, kissed her goodbye, and walked out the door. he was 18 years old. That is the most truthful portrait of who he was before this case defined him in headlines. A son who thought to take care of his family before he left. His family is still waiting for answers. This case is not closed. If this breakdown gave you something that other coverage hasn't, the like button is the most direct way to make sure this information reaches more people. And if you're not already part of this community, subscribe to File Unsolved right now. When the grand jury convenes, when the sealed autopsy becomes public, when the forensic phone results are announced, this channel will be here with the same documented, detailed breakdown you just watched. Turn on notifications and be here when this case moves. Nolan's family hasn't stopped. Neither has File Unsolved.